I still remember standing in the conference room at work, half listening to my coworkers' weekend plans when my phone buzzed. My wife's name flashed on the screen. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes she'd call to ask me to grab groceries, or maybe pick up takeout on my way home. But the moment I answered, her voice was cold, almost gleeful. "I'm divorcing you," she said, no preamble or softening. My heart clenched, but before I could even respond, she dropped the bigger bombshell. "And by the way, I've already sold the house, so I guess you better find a new place to live." Then she laughed, like it was all some grand joke. For a moment, my mind struggled to keep up. Divorce? Selling our home? And that laugh, so casual, so smug, pierced through my shock, igniting something deeper than pain. Resolve. I forced my voice to remain calm, replying with a neutral, "Oh," as if she'd told me she'd switched brand of coffee. There was a brief, stunned silence on her end. She'd expected me to shout, to beg, to break. Instead, I ended the call before she could gloat any further. Inside, my emotions roared. Hurt, betrayal, anger. We'd shared that house for years, lovingly renovated it together, filled its walls with our dreams. The fact she'd sold it behind my back, like I was a stranger who didn't matter, stung beyond words. But beneath the pain, a steely determination took root. Because while she loved shortcuts and bravado, I'd always been the detail person. And there was one detail she missed: the updated deed. A few months prior, when we refinanced, she'd casually signed paperwork she never bothered reading. Paperwork that put the house solely in my name. She'd sold a house she didn't actually own. As I walked out to my car, I couldn't help a wry grin. My wife had no idea she'd just handed me the perfect weapon. She thought she was the one dropping the hammer, oblivious that I held the real power. Later that day, I contacted my lawyer, Chloe, a college friend who knew my situation better than anyone. When I told her about my wife's little stunt, Chloe actually laughed. "She sold a house? That's not even legal," she said. "If she's already taken money from the buyer, that might be straight-up fraud." It was all I needed to hear. The next few days were surreal. My wife called twice, once with more smug taunts. "Hope you like couch surfing, because Jordan and I are moving in soon." Jordan, apparently, was her new man. The second call was shorter, just her cackling about how she'd finally be free and how I was too boring for her fast-paced life. Each time, I simply replied, "Sounds great," and hung up. Her arrogance was breathtaking, and the more she gloated, the more satisfied I felt knowing the punchline she was racing toward. Finally, the time came to confront her. She didn't know I'd flown home early. Her parting shot suggested she thought I'd be out of town for another week. But I wasn't. When I pulled into our driveway, she was standing on the porch, leaning into some guy's arms, Jordan, I assumed, and talking excitedly about paint colors they'd use once they took possession. Jordan spotted me first, and his cocky smirk flickered. My wife turned, and her confident smile briefly faltered. She recovered fast, though, tossing me a careless wave, as if I was an intruder in my own home. I stepped closer, slid my key into the lock, and opened the door without a word. Her eyes narrowed. She obviously expected me to be locked out. Following me inside, she started to rant about how she'd sold the place, that I should pack my crap and leave before the new owners arrived. I waited until Jordan and my wife were both standing in the living room, arms folded in smug defiance. Then, with a calm I didn't entirely feel, I handed them a copy of the deed. The one bearing only my name. Confusion flickered across my wife's face, and Jordan's smirk faded. "What is this?" she demanded, flipping through the pages. My voice stayed steady. "It's the updated deed. The one you signed when we refinanced. You know, the paperwork you never bothered reading." She paled, eyes darting to Jordan, then back to me. "That's impossible," she stammered. "I sold it." "No," I said, crossing my arms. "You tried to. You took someone's money for a house that's not yours to sell. Enjoy explaining that if they come after you for fraud." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Jordan took a step back, clearly realizing he'd hitched his wagon to a bad plan. "You said it was your place," he snapped at her. She ignored him, rounding on me. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I just did." I paused, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. "Oh, and if you think this changes the divorce, think again. My lawyer's already filing. Don't bother contesting unless you want everything to come out. The new boyfriend, the fraudulent sale. I'm sure a judge would love that story." She stared at me, her bravado shattered. Jordan mumbled something about not wanting to get involved in legal messes, then practically sprinted out the door, leaving her behind, speechless. I left her standing there, watching her grand betrayal crumble. "Make sure you're gone by the end of the week," I said calmly. "I need the keys." She glared, tears forming in her eyes, but I felt no pity. She'd plotted my downfall, but in her haste, she'd only orchestrated her own. And as I stepped back outside, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. My wife thought she could ruin my life with a phone call and a laugh, but instead, she'd only destroyed everything she built, her scheme, her pride, and her new relationship, while I walked away unscathed. And that was the most satisfying part. I didn't even have to raise my voice. My wife's own arrogance had done all the work for me.